Thank you, Amber, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to Mercedes-Benz at South by Southwest. We're here today to talk about maps. Well, we know that great things can happen when you don't have a map. I mean, after all, America was discovered just because there was no proper map. But generally, I think we all agree that maps really help us to go places. However, it better be really accurate and really up to date, be useful. Anyone younger than 20 probably has no idea what this thing is. So everyone older than 20 knows that this is a very reliable thing. It reliably makes your co-driver crazy when they try to work with that. And it's getting even worse when you try to refold this whole thing, so you better don't use it too much. On the other hand, maps have been there forever, but today they have changed a lot. And now, obviously, I probably would have even missed this session, my own session, if I wouldn't have had one of these things which work as maps for all of us today. So, as most of you know, I'm in the car business. And there are so many more cool things about maps and what they can do and will be doing for us than just going or taking us from A to B. I would like to look at two exciting aspects of maps today. First, maps as your scout, and second, maps as your steward. Let's start with maps as your scout. What does that mean? A good scout typically is ahead of you to make sure that you are ahead of the game. That gets even more important down the road to self-driving cars. Because if cars are going to drive themselves, they better know exactly where they are going and how they manage to arrive there safely. Whereas humans use senses like eyes and ears to know where they're heading, cars rely on sensors like cameras or radars or lidars. But just as the human brain, the magic really happens when all this information comes together, information from different sources. And in the car industry, we call this sensor fusion. Sensor fusion represents a big leap ahead in self-driving technology. One example, using this technology, today's Mercedes E-Class doesn't necessarily need clearly visible road marks to stay on track. On highways, you can even see the car changing lanes automatically just upon request. As a result, the current E-Class is the only production car which got the test license in Nevada for autonomous driving on the public roads there in the state of Nevada. Yet, if we want to get from really helpful driver assistant systems today to fully self-driving cars in the future, high precision maps as a scout will play a crucial role. Maps as a scout are yet another powerful source of information, helping the car to understand more of what's going on in its surroundings by matching all available inputs. And maps will tremendously gain importance. They can look beyond the limitations of onboard cameras or radars. They can even see around corners. Think about it. A map with really strong, almost real-time data knows about the icy part of the road around the corner, behind the next curve, or an accident there. It prevents you from getting stuck in accident jams even better than today's tools can help you. And it helps you find the last parking spot downtown. Maps as a scout have a huge potential to enhance safety and convenience on the road today. And they are one important missing link to self-driving vehicles tomorrow. The question is, how do we get there? One answer is a strong cooperation with HD maps provider HERE, a global leader in this field. We will be discussing this in detail later on with HERE CEO Edzard Overbeek in a few minutes. He is with us here today. Their goal is remapping the world in 3D. That's why here is currently measuring more than 30,000 street miles each week at an inch precision level all over the world, and up to a height of 130 feet. So even the tallest of Daimler buses will know whether or not they fit under the bridge or tunnel which is ahead. Our company is supporting this Mapping the World effort with prototype cars that collect up to 7 terabytes of new data per hour. Consider what amount of live data this means for future wireless networks alone. If more cars feed their data back to a cloud platform in order to achieve almost real-time traffic information, I guess we'll need something like 12G instead of the lousy 5G. Because for fully self-driving cars, maps not only need to be ultra accurate, they also need to be ultra up-to-date. Now imagine what would happen if we had more than just a few sources for mapping the world. If every single car collected data on every mile it drove and continuously updated our maps to share the latest information with others. And if we then connected the latest car sensor technology with the latest mapping technology. That's when it's really getting interesting. Last year alone, Daimler sold more than 3 million passenger cars, vans, trucks, and buses. Considering that the mapping company here has more different partners like BMW and Audi, this means more than 7 million new scouts out on the road globally every year. The average American driver alone covers around 12 to 13,000 miles a year. Commercial drivers do a lot more. They could all be collecting and sharing a massive amount of almost real-time data on roadwork, weather conditions, traffic, and more through one mapping platform. Sharing plus gaining information from the onboard sensors is where maps in the car can add major benefits as compared to smartphone-based maps. You get the idea. If you want fully self-driving and, most of all, safe driving cars, you will also need super accurate, reliable, and continuously updating high-definition maps. That's the basic concept behind maps as a host, as a scout. And there's a second powerful dimension to maps that we are planning to fully unleash in the future, maps as your steward. Today, maps do offer great assistance in navigating you. And unlike your average human co-driver, they don't ever shout at you, "Oh no, you idiot just missed the exit again." That helps for a relaxed commute. But we believe maps can provide so much more convenience. In the future, you can think about the map in your car supporting you like a really cool co-driver and dedicated personal steward, no matter if you drive or if the car does the driving itself. A good steward knows more about your personality, likes and preferences, and will thus be able to provide you with perfectly individual advice and highly convenient services. In a car, that means maps, as your onboard steward, will, for instance, find the best route for you. And the best route isn't always the same route. It can vary depending on your current mood, your schedule, and a bunch of other factors. You might want to be on the fastest route when you're going to your office in the morning, according to today's meetings and appointments. On the other hand, you may want to try a more scenic route on a relaxed weekend drive in your area. Or when you arrive in a new city, you may want a tailored route that quickly shows you all the hotspots you are personally interested in from the convenience of your car. And you may want to end up for a drink or two at that cool place where the locals hang out. Of course, your car would also pre-book the nearest parking spot and show you how many of your friends are already there, leaving you to decide if you still want to go or not. The bottom line is this. Your car will get to know more about you, but not to overwhelm you with information. Instead, it will reduce distraction and get you the personalized, right, and most relevant information in the right very moment. at a level of convenience that goes far beyond navigating just from A to B. Now, combining individualized map data with fully self-driving cars in the future leaves us with tremendous opportunities. Think about it. If your car knows your favorite bakery, it will get those fresh pastries you love for breakfast even before you wake up. Or if your car knows your calendar, you will never have to think about taking grandma to the dentist or picking up your laundry. Your car is just doing that for you. These are just two of infinitely more possible tasks cars will be able to take care of in the future with maps as your steward. We will certainly touch upon that in the discussion later. Ladies and gentlemen, maps have long been an enabler for personal mobility. Both as a scout and as a steward, they're becoming a key driver for the next revolution in mobility. A revolution with a huge impact on all of us. Cars that park themselves outside the city will reduce the space needed downtown. This could save more than 5.7 billion square meters in the US alone, experts say. As a result, cities will become cleaner, greener, and more livable. Self-driving trucks and vans can do all delivery and logistics at night to reduce traffic and pollution. We're also going to electrify all of our trucks, vans, and buses for the urban area, so there will be less noise pollution too. Studies estimate that intelligent traffic management could then save up to 50 minutes per person per day. That means self-driving technologies can help us win back the most precious asset we have, time. I'm certain we are on the road to a bright future in mobility and maybe even a better world. It's going to continue to be a very exciting ride. To be honest, we don't even know exactly where this ride, full of opportunities, is going to take us. And we don't know the end. High-definition maps for navigating the future aren't in the market yet. For now, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and ideas. But before we get to the Q&A, I would like to discuss more benefits and challenges of that road with my dear guest and partner, Edzard Overbeek, CEO of HERE. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
We're going to...
You guys got it? First, I have to ask you about your boots. I feel like there's a story there.
Well, I'm a proud owner for about 12 hours now.
I guess you didn't get the memo about the boots.
No, I didn't.
You can have my left one.
All right.
So just to get started, to remind people once again, if you guys have questions, please use the app we mentioned off the top of the presentation, so we can get to those a little bit later. But just to start out, I imagine people who are coming here today would think that the head of Mercedes-Benz was going to join us to talk about autonomous vehicles in general. Instead, we're talking about digital maps, something that people in the audience may think is simply a commodity. Why did you focus on this?
Well, I tried to explain it just before, that it's basically prerequisite for autonomous driving. Yes, of course, the autonomous car has sensors, can look for itself where to go, but this is not enough to do all these unbelievable amounts of different challenges which they meet on the road without pre-information delivered by maps. And that's what maps of today can't deliver. We need these ultra-precise and constantly updating maps we are talking about, and which obviously knows how to get there.
Excellent. And just to pick up on that a little bit, I was reading a New York Times article that talked about the evolution of digital maps. And it was somewhat critical as far as saying it's been a bit slow. Edzard, what do you think of that comment?
Well, slow is a time moment over a certain period, right? So if you think about some of the things that we're doing right now, let me take you back to the earlier start of the presentation of Dieter. You think about maps in a one-dimensional world, which basically was the physical map that we all realize. Then over the years, we have been moving that to a two-dimensional world. We all understand that in a navigation system, and we see that both on the PDAs and in the dashboard. What we're now trying to do is to go to a three-dimensional, real-time, high-definition representation of the world. And as we're going there, we're starting to think through a fourth dimension. And the fourth dimension is you can see through and look through. To the point that was made earlier, you can look around corners. Now back to your question about slow. In the time frame that we have done that, which is over the last 10, 15 years, you could argue, could we have done that quicker, yes or no? My answer is no. I think this is one of the most exciting fields, but also one of the most complex. And there's a lot of people that talk about three-dimensional maps and high definition, and to the point made, we don't have them yet at scale. This is a very complex topic. So I think we're absolutely on track with what we're trying to do, and I think we're absolutely the market leader in what we're trying to do. So no, we're not slow. We're very accurate in what we're doing, and I think we will surprise the world with the next generation digital maps, which nobody realized yet what that is.
And I think technology didn't provide the capacity to do that 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Why do you think they would write that? Why would their perception be that?
Because, I think it's the beautiful thing about human beings, right? We're curious. We want to go faster, right? Because we see what's happening. If you take a look at the pictures that were on, I don't know whether you've seen a point cloud, which is a three-dimensional representation of a building. To do one of those is terabytes of information. To make that real time is very, very complex. So I think we all get excited about the opportunity about 3- and 4-dimensional maps and the digitization of that, yet to the point earlier, the digitization is not yet there, the technologies are not there. But once we get there, I think we all know what the promise is, which is why many companies are stepping into it, because I think, if you have the digital representation of the physical world, both in and outdoor, that's a pretty powerful position to be in.
And we're going to talk a little bit later about how you create these maps, because it's very complex. So we'll get to that in a minute. Dieter, there may be people in the room or people wondering, there's Google Maps, many more people are using Apple Maps, and they may be wondering, why are you investing so heavily in your own map data? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Well, first of all, Maps is not the same as Maps. I showed you this other one back there, and there's obviously quite some difference. And there is no map available which can provide the kind of characteristics we were talking about. So we are convinced as well that here's on top of the game. On top of that, this is generating a humongous amount of data. And data which to some extent is related to what our customers are doing with their cars on the streets. And we do believe that we have a responsibility vis-à-vis these customers, that they can rely on us using this data exclusively for the purpose it's needed to provide the best information for autonomous cars. And in order to make this promise, we have to be in control. And that's at the end the reason, one major reason, why we decided to join forces among a few car manufacturers and acquire here to provide that service.
Would you agree that there needs to be a bit of education in this area?
Well, as it doesn't exist so far, nobody knows a lot about it. No. And so that's obvious. But I think the learning will come by doing. I mean, the general customer of the future doesn't have to know exactly what's happening with this three-dimensional HD map. He just has to see and experience the tremendous benefits.
Excellent. There are more than 4 million miles of roads in the United States. Just to get back to that question about how complex it is to create these digital maps, can you walk us through how they are created?
Yeah, if you take a look at what we've done so far and are still doing, we have our own cars on the road with 4K high-definition cameras, and we basically drive about 50,000 kilometers per week, 30,000 miles per week. And we record that and basically put it into the database. Now, that has been a technology that has been out there. Many of you have seen it from ourselves and others. That has been able to create the first instance of these digitization phases of maps. But if you now start to think through what the future looks like, we have access to, in the future, about 7 million cars that are on the road with all the sensor data, cameras, LiDAR, which is laser, ultrasound, that is feeding it right into our platform.
Every year additional 7 million.
Every year additional. And we're expanding that. We have detailed conversations with other automotive companies, to the point made earlier, so we get towards a critical mass, which is quite unique, and nobody else has that. But then we're tapping into other sources of data. Think of probe data from your mobile phones. Think of data of things, as everything starts to become enabled in the notion of the Internet of Things. And if you then start to build technologies with deep learning, artificial intelligence, and others, where you can train your data centers and your machines to ingest that data real time, now we're talking to a whole different grade of technology, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we have these different data ingestion points from data sets that we real-time mash. And Dieter was mentioning earlier, sensor fusion in the car. We do data fusion in the data center and in the car. And that's when you get the real exciting pieces, because now you can start to see all these different data layers on top of each other. And if you then start to have data scientists on the other side that create out of those unique services and unique products, then you can just imagine how powerful this is going forward. That's what we're doing at here.
And I know probably people couldn't see this, but while Dieter was presenting, you were excited to tell me about the different photos that were being shown. Could you just talk about those two particular images?
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about the photo that was done from the castle, which is a point cloud. Now, what's the nature of a point cloud? Think of it as a LiDAR picture, so a laser picture, where every point is a data point. So now put that into a database. That means you can start to work through all these different data fields. It becomes an object. So if you now in the same castle would do an indoor mapping exercise, you would go to your device, you click on that castle, you double click on the castle unfolds itself into multiple layers. You double click on the multiple layer, we'll blend in all the data feeds that are important for you. If you go to the Louvre, we can get all the paintings that are there at a digital format, and you have a personal assistant, the scout concept, and also the steward concept that we were talking about earlier. And now you start to see the service that we can deliver just out of that single image. So this is not just about the current future, about mapping the world. It is also going inside of these objects and then mash all the relevant data as a service to you, and then start to provide that as a product. And I think that's extremely cool.
Dieter, could you talk a little bit further as far as how sensors within the car will work with this data? I know you talked about it somewhat, but can you expand on that a bit?
Well, it's just putting two extremely powerful capabilities of understanding what's going on around you together. Yep. The car itself has to be its own algorithms being driven by artificial intelligence, learning all the time. And the input comes on the one hand through the sensors, the three different kinds of sensors you're having in the car, plus the information from the map. Yep. And this altogether is now pretty complicated, not to create a big mess, but to have a structural conclusion out of that. Where am I? What is going on ahead of me, around me? And what do I, as a car, have to do to try get my passenger safe from A to B? And either one, only the map or only the sensors, couldn't do the job the way. I mean, we always say about 95% of accidents are created by human failure. So it's obvious autonomous cars will be much safer. What you don't consider in that aspect is that between these accidents, statistical average, there are 14 million kilometers. And in these 14 million kilometers, the human does a damn good job. So it's not that easy for the autonomous car to do an as good job or even a better job what customers will expect. There are in between these accidents which their autonomous car most likely can prevent from happening. So altogether, it's a pretty big challenge, and I myself, an engineer 5 years ago, would have thought this is all science fiction. And now we are really close to it and asking why we're not already there.
Absolutely.
If you also, to that point Dieter's making, if you think about that next version where we're working with a lot of the key leaders in this field, whether that's an NVIDIA, whether that's other players that are providing that sensor and camera data to us, you can now start to map that into the map. So if you have the building here in the middle and you drive in your car, we know where all these other cars are. We understand where pedestrians walk. We understand correlation of trucks. We understand accidents. So now, as you're moving through the city, we can start to do predictive analytics for you. So we can say, listen, if you follow this route, then there's an accident here, we're going to reroute you automatically. Or we're going to make sure that you are warned because of weather conditions that are happening in certain areas, because the car in front of you has been coming into a slippery situation that we real-time sent to your advanced driver system. Just a couple of examples where these two things come together. And this is leading technology, right? All of us talk about it, but to really make this work is very hard, right? It's easy to put it on a PowerPoint slide, I always say, for 30 seconds. It will take you 3 to 5 years to get the first version ready.
And you talk a lot about the power of the crowd, and you're really speaking to that now. Can you expand on that somewhat?
You know, I think that's where part of the secret sauce is. If you think about building maps in a digital format, in the next version, it's all about maintaining it. And that's another word for saying it needs to be fresh. Right? The last thing you want is that you drive with a map and that a road that has been built is not on that map and your car stops. It's a very simple example. So using crowdsourcing technologies, whether that's via user feedback that we're getting over probes and mobile phones, or whether if you go to our website, you can go to a system called MapMaker, where we basically ask you, if you find something in our maps that is not completely real or has changed, could you please take a picture and just tell us what has changed? Send that to us, and then our machine learning algorithms are detecting that difference. Check that with other vehicles or people that have been there, and if it has been the right addition or the right change, we'll do that real time as an update in the map. That's how we're using crowdsourcing.
But I'm reading here just, why don't you use Waze to begin with? And Waze is doing, to some extent, what you're just describing. But this tool is so much more powerful because 100 times, 1,000 times information comes automatically through the sensors of the car without anybody intervening, making a fault or not. So that is base information. And then on top of it, like the cream on the cake, we are getting then these additional human information about things which the car might not detect. And the combination, again, is something totally new.
So let's go back to your presentation where you talked about the digital map as your scout and your steward, because I think everybody in the room probably understands the idea of the digital map being your scout. But from the standpoint of the steward, how does the information that you're getting differ from what's already accessible through other apps?
I mean, we just heard of this example where you might, by double-clicking, ultimately see all the paintings in the Louvre and check if you know them or whether you want to go there and visit them. Now, the system over time knows you better and better. So for many, perhaps for most in this room, I don't know, they won't show the Louvre. But they might perhaps show the next hangout for tech people to communicate with each other and who's there. So depending on your personal preferences, you get the information which is relevant for you. I mean, we don't live in a world with a lack of information. The problem we are having is to get qualified information for your personal needs. And that's exactly what these systems will be able to do. We are talking about the 3 places, and the 3rd place is the car. You're spending time at home, you're spending time in your office or wherever you work, and you're spending a lot of time in your car as well. So, and these 3 places, people get known the best. And therefore, we have very qualified data to help you personalize with your tailored offering and services which you might like in the future.
And just to follow up on that, when you're talking about personalization, I have to ask this question because I just wrote an online security book. When it comes to personalization, you have the question of privacy. And how do you protect the car owner's privacy in that scenario?
I mean, to some extent, I relate to that before. On the one hand, we are generating kind of anonymous data, which is used to understand the movement of traffic, as we heard before. And on the other side, we have this personalized data. And the latter one, obviously, and of course, can only be used with a specific approval of the customer we are talking about. And if she and he likes this information, this service is being rendered, then as a prerequisite, she has to accept that we use the data she's delivering or he's delivering. And if not, then this person can't get the services. So that's, again, the reason why we have to be in control of the data to make sure that only then this data is stored to help us making better service.
I think another thing is also to add towards that. I think a lot of it is also our obligation to society to make it just far more transparent what is happening. Right? It can't be that you just say once you can use my data and then it's being used for everything. Right? So why don't we build an interface, which is actually what we're doing, where we're just telling you, right? If you want to use this service, then this is what we're doing. We're only using it for this. And are you okay with that? Yes, I'm okay with that. Okay. And then once you've stopped using that service, we stop collecting that. I think that's where the industry needs to go, and it's a responsibility that we take very serious, because privacy is at the very core, right? Some things you don't mind, some things you do, and we need to respect that.
And you can respect people's concerns in the sense that this is what they're probably thinking as you talk about some of this technology.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dieter, next question for you, because Mercedes-Benz is a luxury car maker, but some people may think to themselves, well, if we have autonomous vehicles that are driving us around, does it matter if they have some of those features from luxury cars? What do you think of that?
Well, when you have cars being used as autonomous cars and shared, obviously the use rate will go up significantly. Today, an average car is used an hour per 24 hours. Yeah. In these platforms, cars are used much more. That means that amortizing the difference in cost and price between a volume product and a premium product is per hour has a much lesser impact. Therefore, it becomes much more affordable to go premium. And for that reason, I'm very much convinced that these services will have higher penetration of premium products than the general fleet we are knowing today. If it's just 1 cent or 2 cents more per mile or per 10 minutes or whatever it is, it's still nicer to have a car which gives you a real great ambience, especially as in the future this is your third space and you're living in it. You're not just getting from A to B, that's a side effect, but you're getting entertained, you can relax, you can even have some services providing better health to you. You, of course, can communicate, you can do your work, being in a video conference, whatever. And all of these services can have different levels of comfort, of luxury. And I'm very much convinced that this will be an extremely attractive demand or attractive offering, which will create a lot of demand.
You're going to have to bump Starbucks from the 3rd place to now the 4th place in this process too. Okay, so one more question for you, Dieter, before we get into the questions. So again, please ask questions through the app, and we will get to them. We'll have a good amount of time for them. We see them coming in right now, so we know there are lots of questions from the audience. Just one last question for you, Dieter. In the US, when we talk about autonomous vehicles, probably the first names that come to people's minds are Tesla and Google. Do you think that the traditional car companies are losing ground in this space?
I'm in this business since 40 years, and I don't know one single year where I wouldn't have been asked if we wouldn't have slept over all the new developments and forgotten it all, and others were passing us and we were left behind. We are in a relatively good position today, but I know that we have to work very hard and change fast in order to stay in that position. I would say within the car industry, we at Mercedes, when it comes to autonomous cars, are definitely in a leading position. When we include non-car players, there are certainly 1 or 2 who are ahead of us. And that's just a fact. For me, it's important that we in our company understand it's not good enough anymore to be better than BMW and Audi. We have to be better than all players who interfere in this mobility world of the future. And that's a new challenge, but it's a challenge we are happily taking on and taking the necessary steps to make sure that we will still be successful in this broader competition. And partnering is one aspect of it, and that's, again, one reason why we decided to go into this partnership.
Excellent. All right, so we're going to open it up to questions now. There are quite a few that are coming in already. We'll have just over 20 minutes to talk about some of these questions. Let's start with the first one. You're always talking about your car. Why do you think in the future of autonomous driving, people will own cars instead of being shared resources? And Dieter, if you want to start with this one?
Yep. We are bundling our activities in 4 major trend directions which we are seeing, and we are using an acronym to call that CASE. And case means connected, means autonomous, means shared and electric. So of course, sharing is one very important part in this future mobility. And of course, on the one hand, we try to understand how our product on these platforms can be the most desirable. We think as well how we could succeed in operating these platforms or some of these platforms ourselves to stay in direct contact with our customers. But on the other hand, sharing platforms require certain density of customers, of traffic, else you're waiting forever to share. And even though we all know that in a few decades 6% of mankind will live in these huge metropolitan areas, even in these areas, the areas of sufficiently high density are not the entire city, but it's the downtown, the inner city. And therefore, even when sharing platforms will provide for a significant part of the mobility of the future, we'll have an even bigger part, which still you only can overcome with car ownership. So it's not that we think that's our business model of yesterday, so let's defend it and not think about anything else. We very much know that things are changing. We were the first with car to share, and still in this particular form of sharing, the largest one in the world, starting outside of European Houston. So we try to develop these platforms to the extent possible ourselves as well, but we know as well these things will exist in parallelity.
Excellent. I do just want to mention too, although we're encouraging people to download the app and ask questions, we do have a microphone in the middle of the room. If you have chosen not to download the app and you want to come and line up for questions, and we can simply bounce between the two as to ensure that everybody gets their question in. Edzard, I wanted to follow up. We did answer that question about Google Maps and Waze, but there's a second part to that question, which I think you could probably answer quickly. I know you touched on this, but the question is, why not use crowdsourcing to build better maps? And I think it's worth answering that.
Well, you know, crowdsourcing, we're using that. As I said earlier, I think it's a very important piece of how digital maps are being built going forward. But let's take this to the next level. Okay, so now we have physical infrastructure being mapped. Okay, cool. And we're using crowdsourcing, we're using probe data, we're using LiDAR data, we're using sensor data. But in the next 10 years, the physical roads need to be moved towards virtual roads. What do I mean with that? Well, I'm sure you've heard about drones, about advanced robotics that are happening in parallel. For those of you who were at CES earlier this year, there was a whole just about drones and what that means. And there's a lot of speculation about cars going to fly, drones delivering medication versus drones delivering your pizza, etc. Think now in a major city, in between buildings. You have the physical roads, and you start to now layer on top of that the virtual roads. That's where these devices will start to fly through. Now, how do you do that with Waze? Well, you can't, right? So what you need to do is you need to drive still a combination of a whole bunch of technologies. So when you build maps going forward, you're not just looking two-dimensional. You start to look three-dimensional. You need to get in front of the next use cases that are running in parallel as all these things start to fly and drive autonomously. And I think that's where we position here, and that's the partnership we have with Daimler, to really think out of the box, not just about what our joint customers want in the next 2, 3, 4 years, but how you're using all these technologies and how we can build something that is ready to be future-proof in the next 10 years from now.
That's where another aspect comes in as well. It's not just about transporting people. It's about transporting goods as well. And with all their internet shopping we're all doing today, still, as long as we don't print all the goods in our homes, you need physical delivery. And that's where the real bottleneck is. It's not the big PDCs, it's the physical delivery. And that's why Amazon starts to build some retail stores, because they can't get to the people anymore with the physical delivery. And at that point, we are making the first practical pilots, where we're having our vans equipped in a special way, much more efficient than the delivery happens today.
Yes.
And the last mile, again, is done by drone. So the vehicle goes into the neighborhood, and from there, 5 drones in parallel can go for the last bit and bring the goods to the different places. And at that time, the van already continues to the next, if you want, hub, where the drones come back and go out again. So all of these tasks can't be done by crowdsourcing, by you need ants sitting in the drones or something. So obviously, we need these systems we're talking about, this maps.
And just to add towards that, so now think of those vans and then the drones come out. Think of a 3-dimensional digital representation of a city that knows exactly that you live on the 3rd floor in an apartment and you want your delivery onto that particular spot. Or you have a garden in the back of your house where we can land that thing at centimeter precision. That's not done by crowdsourcing. Right? That's a combination of very different technologies that you mesh into this data sensor fusion data center that real-time sends that to the truck when the drone comes out. And this is around the corner, so some of you will say, wow, that looks pretty, spectacular. It's around the corner. We're actually experimenting with these kinds of technologies as we sit.
Hanover last year, we had a future van which was showing exactly these capabilities. This had little robots going on the sidewalks as well, where it's feasible, and drones where this is the better option.
Excellent. We have a question from the app from Brad King. We'll get to that in 1 second, but you've been standing there for a couple minutes, so please go ahead with your question.
Hello, thank you. Great boots, by the way, in case the audience hasn't seen them.
Thank you.
You talked about having multiple million vehicles on the road already, and my understanding is that the average consumer buys a new car, every 5 years, give or take? Are you thinking in any way about retrofit kits for existing vehicles to make them autonomous?
Obviously, we are talking, on the one hand, about the sensors which are necessary to provide that capability. Secondly, we are talking about an amazing amount of computer capacity, to the extent that this capacity needs like 2 to 2.5 or even 3 kilowatt of cooling power. So when you have an electric vehicle, at that point of time, you can assume that the autonomous capability will take like 20% of the capacity, which is reduced of the range, just to cool the computer. So these things are still. And therefore, I'm afraid that this backward compatibility is still a little too high a challenge for the engineers, because you basically would have to do a new vehicle to retrofit it into this autonomous world.
It sounds a lot like no.
That would be the shorter answer, thanks.
So can I push you very slightly? I mean, traditional internal combustion engines are capable of producing all the power you need, and you already have onboard air conditioning systems for most of those. So is this really an insurmountable technical challenge? Surely one of the ways to accelerate autonomous adoption and therefore generate the data that you're looking for your maps is to get this to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible.
I mean, as I said, I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, I would never say no. When you don't have a solution, it's normally that you don't have it today and you might find it tomorrow. Still, for the reasons I mentioned, and the air conditioning does not provide the kind of cooling capacity you need, and the customer might not be entirely happy when the computer is fine, but he has 50 degrees in the car. So it's a tough task, and as you rightfully said, you have this kind of 5-year circle where vehicles get replaced, and still used cars are interesting as well, and used car customers want to have capable cars as well. But within this time frame, we are seeing these technologies come to life more and more. So people who are interested probably should adjust their own repurchase cycle to these advances and then buy the right car in the first place.
I think also to add to that question, right, I think retrofit will be very tricky. because you also need to move our traditional thinking of a client-server architecture where things are being done in the client and things are being done in the server centrally, towards much more of what we describe as a hyperscale distributed compute fabric. What does that mean? Well, it means you have compute instances in your data center, you have compute instances in your edge, you have compute instances in your core, you have compute instances in your mobile phone. We all know the mobile phone of today was the first mainframe 50 years ago, right? The compute power. So to the point that Dieter said, if you start to build architecturally a solution to do this, we're just at the early stages. So it's almost impossible to retrofit that because the technology develops so fast into a whole different system setup that those components will actually slow it down if you would retrofit it. It's more pushing it forward to really make sure that each of these different compute instances is being optimized, because otherwise you would start to have a huge bill by paying, over 5G even, a huge transfer of data. You need to keep that very, very small. So it's an architectural solution we're thinking of, not just a retrofit solution.
Plus, this whole system still is relatively costly.
Yeah.
And when you retrofit it, of course, it becomes much more costly because it can't be done in a plant with an industrial process. On the other hand, the value of the remaining car comes down over time. Yeah. So you come at a point where you spend more than the overall value of your cars.
So I can tell just by your stance that you probably want to follow up, which I totally respect, but we have dozens of questions coming in. So thank you so much for your question, and let's move on to the app.
Thank you.
Let's get to this first question because it's one that probably many people have through the app, one that I've heard for years now talking about autonomous vehicles. The question is, who lives, who dies? Does a driverless car kill you or a pedestrian?
This, of course, is a valid question, and we ourselves raised that very early on in the process. We have a foundation, and we asked quite a number of very capable professors of very different venues to think about all the questions going around autonomous driving and starting to find the first answers to them. And this, of course, is one of the questions. And this is not limited just to autonomous cars. It's basically related to robots in general, whether they are at the working place or wherever. And this is a discussion which cannot be held within an automotive company or between automotive companies. This is a question which has to be discussed in society at large. On the one hand, it's certainly entirely unthinkable that some line code programmers are thinking about some algorithms, whether people with gray hair or with brown hair have a preference or something like that. It is an issue which we have to deal with, and there have to be found general answers and general ethical agreements about these questions. On the other hand, we should not over-stress this issue because it's an extremely, extremely unlikely situation, which I don't know if in real life it will happen or not, that the vehicle really has these two choices and can identify them and then try to weigh them against each other. In the first place, it's trying to avoid an accident, and then there might be a collateral damage by doing so. So once again, I don't want to reduce that. We have to deal with it, but we have 99.999 situations which we can clearly deal with and know how to do, and we have to deal with that thing at the sideline as well.
So let's go back into the questions. We mentioned Brad King has a question within the app. Edzard, maybe you would take this one about real-time data. The question is, with real-time data collection by cars, how do you protect that data so it's not used for nefarious purposes such as surveillance or spying?
Yeah. You know, and let me bring that to the larger context that I think we touched on also earlier. The security piece of this is extremely important in combination with the privacy piece. And any company that does not take that serious and is abusing that, I think will fail in the mid to long term. So what do I mean with that? If you start to collect data, you need to be transparent to the users that you're doing so. And then there is a choice. Every user can say, I would like to do that for this and this. I would not like you to do that for that and that. Then there's a second piece. Once you have that data, you need to make sure that you protect that data, right? Which is where the security comes in. And clearly, building that into a world where we have closed systems that you can physically protect towards cloud-based systems is a whole different ballgame. And this is where I think as an industry we all need to step up our game, because if that is not something that we can protect going forward, then that could be a major setback for all of us. And it's almost in line with the conversation we just had earlier. This is a larger question that needs to answer. We believe that this needs an industrial standardization across automotive, technology, telecommunications, and others, to make sure that we come to these standards the same way we've solved many of the security questions if you think about the IT world, where in the beginning, in the 50s, everybody said, well, I'm not going to go online because you might read my files and my letters. Well, today, that's not a concern anymore. So we need to solve that going forward as an industry, and I think coming together, doing that in a standardization body, I think is one of the ways to go.
So we just have about 8 minutes left, and then Dieter, I know you have an announcement that you're going to share with us at the end of the presentation. Let's get into this next question. I think it's Sarek. Sarek asks, BMW and Audi are also investing in HERE maps. How does Mercedes plan to differentiate from its major competitors if they are all walking in the same direction?
I mean, that's a very critical question we have to ask ourselves all the time. We are using the word of frenemies. So there are many entities out there which in some areas might be good partners for you to cooperate. In other areas are your fiercest competitors. And we cannot just separate the ones from the others. This is mingling, and it's depending on the area we're talking about. So in every single situation, we have to ask ourselves, are we together making more progress faster to offer to our customers altogether better solutions earlier? Or is there an area where we really can differentiate each other and get a heads up in the competition? Yep. And as far as infrastructure is concerned, we just built another consortium where we're investing in the very capable charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. We are not a better or worse car company if Esso or Shell has different stations. So in this sense, infrastructure for us is not the main field of competition, but if neither one of us can satisfy the need of our customers for charging stations, we won't sell our electric cars. So there are areas, and we think the same applies for this mutual activity with HERE. There are areas where we all need a prerequisite for future services, and then on that platform we'll be able to offer specific use cases which will be different between the competitors, and which then will differentiate us vis-a-vis the customer. So I'm very much convinced that it was a smart move to do that together.
Yeah, I think so also. I think also if you take I try to, do predictions about the future by just looking at the past and what happened. You look at the car industry 50 years ago, many car manufacturers had a fully vertically integrated chain, right? Up until making your own tires, doing your engines, all of that. If you start to move that forward, you see that there's a very clear differentiation between core and context. What is core for yourself, and how can you outsource, out-task, nearshore that into aligning industries? If you now take that forward to the point Dieter is making, if you start to use the same logic, there are components that make so much sense to cluster even between competitors, because the economic value you get as a return to that company is much higher. But then you also need to continuously differentiate yourself, which is moving up that value stack into associated industries. And I think that's where the companies of the future will be. I am a firm believer that any company that thinks they can do it all by themselves, they will fail. This thing is far too fast, far too complex. It's all about finding the right strategic partnerships, and sometimes that means you're partnering with your competitors, because the value you create for your users, your consumers, your shareholders is much greater than if you would do it yourself. And I think that's just a logical way of running your business.
Excellent. Let's get to this question from Lars, and Dieter, if you'd answer this one. Who will own the customer during an autonomous drive? The question is, for example, with branded entertainment, it will be very easy for competitors to engage with Mercedes-Benz customers.
Well, first of all, I would challenge this expression of owning a customer. Exactly. I think nobody will own a customer, and the customer wouldn't really be very pleased if you would claim to own them. We all are offering services, and it's up to the customer if she or he prefers the one or the other service.
Absolutely.
And we definitely will not win by trying to exclude other services from customers who are dealing with our products or our services. So many have their ecosystem where they're very familiar with, and what they're asking for is to have a seamless transition when they go into the car to stay within their ecosystem. And others will like our ecosystem better, and then they will switch off what they had before and focus on what we can offer based on all the internal data we have for the car and so on. And again, their competition is what makes us all better. Our claim of fame must be to offer the better ecosystem, then we will win, not by owning the customer.
Excellent answer. All right, let's take this question from Emmanuel. How do you cooperate with your competitors on system frameworks? Do you plan to have all systems fully open?
Well, definitely not. We're already touching on cybersecurity. And I think this is probably one of the most relevant and toughest challenge we're having ahead of us. Yeah. Because you can have all kind of bad pictures in your head, what could happen if this is not granted, if there's not a clear firewall. And therefore, whatever data traffic goes into the vehicle has to go through controlled servers. Yes. And from these servers, then we can discuss if data becomes available to other sources. But we cannot give access to the car to anybody, and someone else decides where the car is going to go.
Excellent. We only have a couple minutes left, so think about this like speed dating for the gentleman standing right here. So please direct your question to one of our panelists, and let's make it quick.
Yeah, so my question is, how are you future-proofing yourself against becoming a low-value provider of chassis and bodywork?
By doing all of what we talked before. Of course, our key objective in going through this mobility provider instead of just a car manufacturer is to maintain the direct contact to not our but the customers. And the moment there's a layer in between, we might become the Foxconn, and that's definitely not our objective. And that's why I talked about case. We try in all these areas to be at the leading edge in order to offer the best services to the customers possible.
All right, so let's try to squeeze in two more questions. We'll take one from the app. Edzard, we'll start with you, and then we'll take your question. We'll make it quick. This is the question we have on the bottom here. Is there going to be a standard for autonomous cars communicating directly with each other to share map-based data?
So the answer is yes. Part of what we have done already, and this is not just here, this is an industry body, is we created an instance called Sensoris, where basically we're setting the standards for sensor data. So now, as you can imagine, you don't need to spend a lot of time getting different data sets, normalizing them, and then putting them into your database. You have a standard, so everybody can use that standard going forward. That's the first step. You now start to think OTA, over-the-air updates. That standard will help us to do a much more real-time over-the-air update from the map that you will use in your car. So absolutely, I'm, as I said earlier, a big believer of open standards. I think that will help us all, even competitors with each other, between me and others, and many out there, to deliver a far better service and solution to users and customers out there.
And we want to have time to finish up the session with the announcement. So if your question is quick,
yeah, absolutely.
Let's jump into it.
Just on the back of a few questions, how do you see vehicle sales volumes going forward? And what do you see as new opportunities to, I guess, monetize the business model?
Those are two questions, so choose one. Thank you.
To the first one, I certainly would need the crystal ball. But in general, while I, on the one hand, said that shared cars are used more, and therefore you could conclude you need less cars. On the other hand, you're offering so much more services that there will be more use. So altogether, looking at the planet altogether, I am very optimistic that we will continue to see healthy growth rates for the car industry.
Thank you for your question. All right, Dieter, you had an announcement?
Well, even though I'm here only for less than 24 hours, I have the feeling this South by Southwest is an extremely exciting convention with a lot of smart people coming together and participating in the development of the world of tomorrow. Our folks in our company have observed that much longer than just the last 24 hours. And that's where an idea was built. to talk with the people being responsible for South by Southwest if that should be limited to Austin in the long run. And we came to the conclusion that the answer is no, and that's why we decided to partner together for fall at the Frankfurt Motor Show to do a Me convention, where Mercedes-Benz, together with South by Southwest, will have the first export of what's going on here outside of Austin to Frankfurt at the Frankfurt Motor Show for 3 days. And I invite all of you to come there and participate in the 5 main themes we will discuss and deal with together at that forum.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.